It started with something unusually small, almost invisible. A phone that didn't ring when it was supposed to. A message that stayed unanswered for far too long. And inside Buckingham Palace, according to staff whispers, there was a growing sense that something routine had suddenly stopped behaving like routine at all. Because when senior royal communication goes quiet, it's never just silence. It's a signal. Within hours, aides reportedly began double-checking schedules that didn't need double-checking. Conversations were paused mid-sentence when new instructions arrived from senior offices. Even long-established coordination lines between London and Montecito were described as not behaving normally. And the strangest part, no one was willing to say why. At first it looked like a misunderstanding, a delay, a technical gap between teams, but then came the detail that changed the tone completely. A planned exchange involving Prince Harry was suddenly put on hold without explanation. That single phrase triggered more questions than answers. What exactly was put on hold? Who authorized it? And why did it feel to those inside the system like something had been quietly switched off rather than paused? Because behind palace walls, pauses don't just happen. They are made. And almost immediately, another layer of confusion began forming on the other side of the Atlantic. In California, sources close to Meghan Markle described an unexpected shift in atmosphere. Nothing publicly visible. No statements. No appearances. Just what one insider called a noticeable urgency behind closed doors. Phone calls that usually came through secure channels were reportedly redirected. Messages that once moved quickly between teams began taking longer than usual. And the same question kept surfacing again and again in different forms. Is something changing in London? But the truth, whatever it was still hidden beneath procedure, protocol, and carefully controlled silence. Then came the moment that escalated everything. A scheduled briefing involving King Charles and senior royal advisors reportedly ran longer than expected. Far longer. And when it ended, something subtle but important shifted in tone across royal communication channels. Not publicly. Privately. Instructions were allegedly updated. Language was adjusted. Certain references to family coordination were replaced with more formal phrasing. To outsiders, that might sound meaningless. But inside the royal system, wording is everything. And that's when the first real open question emerged. Was this just administrative, or was something far more permanent being decided? Because around the same time, reports began circulating that Prince Harry's role within ongoing royal communications had been reassessed. Not publicly announced, not confirmed, but noticed through changes in access patterns, scheduling priority, and internal routing structures. And once those patterns change, they rarely change back. Still, no one had the full picture yet. Not even those closest to the situation. And then the story took a sharper turn. A second wave of information, still unverified, still cautious, suggested that certain formal ties between Prince Harry and royal operational channels had been reduced to what insiders described as strictly necessary contact only. That phrase hit differently. Because it didn't sound emotional, it didn't sound personal. It sounded procedural. And that is often where the most significant decisions hide. Meanwhile in Montecito, Meghan Markle's name began surfacing in connection with growing concern over what was unfolding, though not through any direct statement. Instead, it came through subtle behavior changes described by those nearby, an increase in private meetings, a tightening of internal communications, and what one source called a heightened awareness of every call coming from the UK. But even then, nobody was sure what they were reacting to. Because the palace still hadn't confirmed anything. And that uncertainty created its own pressure. Then came the midpoint twist that reframed everything. A separate report suggested the issue wasn't just communication, but authority. Specifically who had it and who didn't anymore. Because while headlines outside focused on family tension, insiders were allegedly dealing with something more structural. A reassessment of Prince Harry's formal connection to royal decision pathways during King Charles's current period of consolidation within the monarchy. In other words, this wasn't just about distance. It was about definition. What role, if any, remained officially active? And that's where the situation stopped feeling like speculation and started feeling like a turning point. Because shortly after, the language reportedly used inside royal briefings shifted again, this time even more sharply. References to collaborative family engagement were replaced with independent branches of operation. It sounded harmless, but in royal context, terminology like that is rarely accidental. It signals separation. Not emotional, not symbolic. Structural. And once that idea entered the system, everything began to reframe itself around it. Suddenly, earlier moments, the paused communication, the delayed coordination, the revised access patterns, didn't look like isolated incidents anymore. They looked connected. Like pieces of a decision that had already been made quietly, step by step behind closed doors. And then came the detail that pushed the story into its most intense phase. According to multiple overlapping accounts, King Charles had approved a formal tightening of royal boundaries concerning Prince Harry's ongoing involvement in official family structures. Not a public announcement, not a dramatic statement, but an internal administrative shift that effectively reduced his direct connection to royal operations to its most limited form. And just like that, everything changed. Because what looked like silence was actually conclusion. No speeches were needed. No public confrontation was required. The system itself had been adjusted in a way that made the separation real without ever needing to be loudly declared. And the reaction, according to those watching closely, was immediate. In the UK, aides reportedly became even more careful with wording. In California, attention sharpened around every incoming update. And between both sides, the space where communication once flowed easily became controlled, filtered, and heavily restricted. But what makes this moment even more striking is what still isn't clear. Was this a final decision meant to close a chapter permanently, or a temporary structural adjustment during a period of internal review? Because nothing from the palace confirms permanence, and nothing from Harry's side confirms acceptance, which leaves the entire situation suspended in a very unusual state, one where the official structure has changed, but the emotional story has not caught up yet. And that gap is where the tension now lives. Because in moments like this, silence doesn't mean peace. It means something has already shifted, and not everyone has been told exactly how far it's gone. And perhaps the most unsettling question of all is this. If the structure has already changed behind the scenes, who will be the first to finally say it out loud?